Myself Siddharth Chauhan. Welcome to Easy MedChem. Today's part of the video will be covering about the regional pattern of gut development. So in the previous section of the video we had learned about the embryology of the nervous system. That is, in the third week of development the gastrulation starts, or the epiplastic cells will form a three germinal layer, that is the ectoderm, mesoderm and endoderm. At the fourth week of development the neurulation starts, and at the fifth week of development the complete neural tube is being formed. Today's part of the video will be covering about the regional pattern of gut development. So let's start. The pharyngeal apparatus. The pharyngeal apparatus is nothing but a development of most of the structures of head and neck are from the pharyngeal apparatus. That is, the pharyngeal apparatus consists of three parts. That is, it consists of pharyngeal arch, pharyngeal pouches and pharyngeal grooves. Okay. The pharyngeal apparatus consists of three parts: the pharyngeal arch, pouch and the groove. If this is a rough diagram of the pharyngeal apparatus, this is the diagram of the pharyngeal apparatus. Okay, these are the pharyngeal arches, and these towards the outer side, towards this side the pharyngeal pouch is formed, and towards this side the pharyngeal grooves are formed. Okay, these structures are formed during the fourth week of development. We are having 5 pharyngeal arches: first, second, third, fourth and sixth. The fifth one is not completely formed, and so it will get degenerate. So we are counting first, second, third, fourth and sixth. The pharyngeal arches. There are almost 5 pharyngeal arches which are named as the first pharyngeal arch, second, third, fourth and sixth pharyngeal arch. From these arches the structures are being formed. Some structures, some nerves and some muscles are formed. From the first pharyngeal arch, the structures are formed are the mandibles, the mandible, maxilla, malleus and the incus. Mandible, maxilla, malleus and the incus are formed from the first pharyngeal arch. And the mandibular division of the trigeminal nerve. We know that the trigeminal nerve consists of 3 divisions. From the mandibular division of trigeminal nerve is formed from the first pharyngeal arch. And the muscles are the mastication muscles, that is the masseter, temporalis, lateral and medial pterygoid, mylohyoid, anterior belly of digastric, tensor tympani and tensor belli palatini. All these muscles are being formed from the first pharyngeal arch. Okay, so the pharyngeal arch or the first pharyngeal arch, some structures, some nerves and some muscles are formed. The structures are the mandibles, maxilla, malleus and incus are being formed from the first pharyngeal arch. The mandibular division of the trigeminal nerve is formed from the first pharyngeal arch, and the masseter, temporalis, lateral and medial pterygoid muscles, mylohyoid, anterior belly of the digastric. We have to remember that the anterior belly of the digastric, it is not the posterior belly of digastric which is formed from the first pharyngeal arch. It is the anterior belly of digastric which is formed from the first pharyngeal arch. Tensor tympani and tensor belli palatini is formed from the first pharyngeal arch. Okay. The second pharyngeal arch. The second pharyngeal arch will also form some structures. It will also form from nerves and some muscles. So from the second pharyngeal arch the structures formed are the stapes, styloid process, lesser horn of the hyoid bone and the upper body of the hyoid bone are being formed from the second pharyngeal arch. The facial nerve is formed from the second pharyngeal arch. So we have to remember that the mandibular division of the trigeminal nerve is formed from the first pharyngeal arch, and the facial nerve is formed from the second pharyngeal arch. The muscles of the facial expression, full facial expression muscles are formed from the second pharyngeal arch, that is the stapedius, stylohyoid, posterior belly of the digastric muscle is formed from the second pharyngeal arch. So we have to remember that the anterior belly of the digastric is formed from the first pharyngeal arch, whereas the posterior belly of the digastric is formed from the second pharyngeal arch. The second pharyngeal arch will give rise to the facial nerve. It will form a stapes, styloid process, lesser horn of the hyoid and upper body of the hyoid are being formed from the second pharyngeal arch. The third pharyngeal arch, from the third pharyngeal arch also some structures, muscles and nerves are formed. The structures are the greater horn of the hyoid, lower body of the hyoid bone are formed from the third pharyngeal arch, and the glossopharyngeal nerve is formed from the third pharyngeal arch, and the stylopharyngeal muscle is formed from the third pharyngeal arch. From the fourth pharyngeal arch, thyroid cartilage is formed, and the superior laryngeal branch of the vagus nerve is formed from the fourth pharyngeal arch. And the muscles are the cricothyroid, levator palatini, and the pharyngeal muscles are formed from the fourth pharyngeal arch. And from the sixth pharyngeal arch also, the structure formed is the laryngeal cartilage. So the thyroid cartilage is formed from the fourth pharyngeal arch, and the laryngeal cartilage is formed from the sixth pharyngeal arch. The recurrent laryngeal branch of the vagus nerve or the 10th cranial nerve is formed from the sixth pharyngeal arch. And the muscles are the laryngeal muscles. Striated muscles of the esophagus are being formed from the sixth pharyngeal arch. So that's all for today's part of the video. We'll be continuing the remaining section of the embryological part of the nervous system in the next section of the video. So do like, share and subscribe my channel and press bell icon for more notification. And please guys do comments also. Thank you. Please like, share and subscribe Easy MedChem and press bell icon for more notification.